Listen up, guys. I have found the ultimate t-shirt. Have you ever worn a wool t-shirt? If not, thank me later. They are truly nature's miracle. Our friends at Unbound Merino sent me these spectacular clothes, and let me tell you, these shirts are out of this world. They're made of 100% ultra-fine premium merino wool. It's not the itchy kind. And they are functional, minimalist in style, a wardrobe staple, and most importantly, they're sustainable. Naturally odor resistant, antibacterial, and fast drying, you can work out in these clothes. You can go out in them. And in my case, you can even go to space in them, which I actually did. There's no need for a washing machine, which is good because there isn't one in space. When you wear Unbound Merino for several consecutive days, you will still smell fresh and look stylish the whole time. Visit www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code down to earth for a special 15% discount at checkout. That's www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code down to earth for a special 15% discount. Finally, a big thanks to Unbound Merino for sponsoring this episode. Hello and welcome to Down to Earth with Terry Virts, where we talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. And we have the coolest guest today. I'm so excited. Jeff Corwin is going to be joining us. Jeff is a longtime television personality. He's done a lot of wilderness and conservation shows. He's got a few shows right now. One is Alaska Animal Rescue on Natgeo Wild. He's launching a new series on 21st century conservation. And he's also on Ocean Treks on ABC. He's got a pretty impressive IMDb page, to say the least. So Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Terry. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I wish we were in Massachusetts. That trip up there was a while ago.
I know the last time you were here, you left and I found 6 empty wine bottles on the floor. So.
Man, you were drinking a lot that
night. You were too. so was the other 9 people. So
yeah, that part. Yeah. Your house was packed.
Yeah. Pre-COVID, everyone. Pre-COVID.
That was like the day before COVID.
Day before COVID. Yeah. So pre-COVID.
It was like it was about to happen. We knew we were hoping to squeeze in one trip. I think I had a trip that week after that got canceled right then. But anyway, yeah, it's great to have you here. You've got a lot of projects going on now.
Yeah, you know, it's an interesting time. COVID has certainly proved to a lot of folks in my world, my industry, whether it's conservation of wildlife, which has been derailed from this virus, or whether it's been the television and entertainment industry has been derailed. It's necessity is the mother of invention. So you find ways to get creative and crafty in times like this.
That's an interesting point, how conservation's been derailed, but in some ways, the lack of driving and flying has helped. Right? I've noticed, I live on a lake and there's been so many birds this year. Like all the birds came back. There's just millions of ducks and egrets, and there was a bunch of vultures that were eating the dead fish from the big freeze we had here recently.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, we look at the world and we see the front cover of a newspaper in Italy, and it shows the fish are coming back to the Venice waterways. We see, mountain sheep invading highways and roadways in Europe. We see little gleaming bits of moment of that shows the resiliency of nature. But the truth is, we would need 30 to 50 years of COVID lockdown to truly make a dent into the impact of climate change and other significant 21st century environmental challenges that we face today. So yes, I think COVID shows us that when humanity shuts down, the world kind of rebounds and nature kind of says, thank you for the vacation. But the truth is, our challenges we face are so significant. While there's many examples and little glimmers of hope, we are really in a tremendous time of challenge when it comes to saving our wild planet.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love that word you use, anecdote, because it's important to have like a scientific disciplined approach to things. Like if just because you see if somebody gets the vaccine and they get sick, you can't say, well, we can't do vaccines anymore, right? You have to look at things with lots of data points over time to draw scientific conclusions. A
Yeah.
lot of times.
If you got your COVID vaccine and got hit by a car, you don't say,
Right.
don't get your COVID vaccine. You're going to get hit by a car. Yes.
Right.
It's evidence. And unfortunately, we live in such an interesting time when it comes to, we've gone, and we have talked about this many times before. And if we take the politics out of it, we live in a time where anyone can get the validated information, even if it's not factual, that proves their belief, even if it's incorrect. You can go out there into the webosphere and get validated and evidence of something that the earth is flat, whatever that controversial theory is. We now live in this time where we can counterbalance science. And it's kind of amazing to me that, and I think this has come through various streams in the political world, that science doesn't matter that much anymore, and we can question science. And I think it's a terribly, terribly dangerous place to be and see, whether it's how we deal with COVID, protecting our planet, how we explore the world and make discoveries and use natural resources. All of that is now in jeopardy because science really doesn't matter. And you're an explorer with a strong penchant for science. I am as well. It's kind of interesting and both terrifying that this is the world we live in, where someone could look at you eye to eye and say, no, I think you're wrong because I found this that says that scientifically isn't correct, even though we have the data and the resources that say it was verified and validated through incredible intensive research.
Yeah, it's a scary world. And I know your world is conservation and wildlife and so on. But just the idea that you kind of have to, and I hate the word believe. Belief is for religion. Like I don't believe in science. I just know science.
Right.
Or I don't know, right? There's some things that we don't know. It's not a belief.
Right.
It's either
Right.
you know it or you're not sure. You're going to find out. I changed my Twitter headline a few years ago to in God I trust, everybody else has to bring data.
Right.
And that's along the lines of, we really need to focus on, what's real and what's not. We've created this universe of alternate facts. And it affects, our climate policy, but it also affects a lot of other policies in the whole political world. And it's something that hopefully we can kind of tone the rhetoric down and just get back to like the facts. And because if you do things based on that, you'll make better decisions, whatever it is, if it's for conservation or economic policy or whatever else you're looking at.
Yeah, and Terry, I think our most valuable weapon in being a more adaptive species and protecting our planet and making wise decisions and having a healthy planet and long, productive lifespans on this planet, our greatest tool in the toolbox is STEM and scientific education.
Yeah.
And to see how in recent times we have taken the importance of science education and have not just put it on the back burner, but we've put it back in the cupboard. I think we're starting to see the impact of that. So hopefully we can refocus and rebalance ourselves to recognize that by educating our children and giving them access to powerful sources of information that make them wiser in the way they will make decisions as an adult, will only benefit us and our nation. So we have a lot of challenges ahead.
Yeah, I think this last year has shown us how important education is. It's kind of scary too, because I think having kids out of school for a year that's not good for kids, especially, it's going to hurt. I think like most things, it hurts, poorer kids more than richer kids. And we need to get back to Hopefully this pandemic will end soon and we can get them back to school.
It's crazy. I mean, we're kind of like, we are the poster family for the impact of COVID, in that I've got 2 kids. One's in middle school, one's a senior in high school. Her whole senior year is gone.
Yeah.
None of the iconic, the proms, the
Yeah.
dances, the Spanish exchange program. You know, it's right before COVID. We had the Spanish kid come stay with us, and
Right.
then he leaves, COVID comes. And I mean, these are little things. These are
Yeah.
little issues, but you know, to my career as a traveling TV show host,
Mhm.
sponsored by a cruise industry, travel industry,
Right.
you can't get more of a challenge than that. But it also, it really, my wife and I were saying that Natasha was telling me, and you know my wife Natasha, not so long ago, she said, you know, this has been a really tough year. We've had to really evaluate how we move forward in certain things. But it's also, she said, we never had you home, because since the day we were married 26, 27 years ago, I've been on the road. I typically am on the road 8 months out of the year.
Right.
And I've been home. So before COVID, that year, whatever that was, a year ago plus, I went to 22 countries.
Wow.
This year, I've been on a plane twice.
Yeah.
You know,
That's amazing.
Big changes.
I'm in the same exact thing. I've been, you know, speaking for a living, and then that ended a year ago, and it's been nice. I'm home. Like, I have this new house now. I know my house. I know the ducks on the pond and stuff. And before that, I was gone constantly. So that's funny. We've had the same, and I had a senior in high school last year, and everything kind of ended. And I got a senior in college this year, and we've had the same experience. But, you know, a lot of other people have had it much worse.
Much worse.
I think than you and I have. So
people have
I
died.
think
Over half a million people lost their lives to this virus.
Just in America. Yeah, it's been awful. I think it's going to be ending soon. I think people need hope. You know, it gets old hearing about just the COVID. It just gets old hearing about all the depressing news. So that's why your programs are so awesome, because they're, you know, they're animals, man. Who doesn't like animals?
Yeah, and I love the shows that we do, and it's interesting. So now I'm into like my 15th or 16th TV series.
Wow.
So
I'm trying to get one. I want my first.
over 12 networks. And it's still exciting, and I still enjoy the challenge. And today there's just so, you know, in the challenge, in the plight of endangered species, we face incredible opportunity to share stories of hope and empowerment and positive things that are happening. And that's kind of the spirit of this current project that I'm working on, with the major US NGO conservation organization that'll be for a major network. We're going to basically travel the United States. It's perfect for COVID, because we're not going to leave the country. And hopefully we'll, you know, people in our age bracket will have our vaccinations in the next month or two, which will line up nicely with production. And it's literally, we're going to use the glasses half full approach, especially coming out of COVID. People have been beaten down.
Yeah.
And you just, we need to say, guess what? Birds are still out there singing. Salmon are still arriving in streams and spawning. There's going to be a sunrise tomorrow, and we're going to get out there and celebrate it, and to show how people have proactively made monumental decisions that are saving our natural resources for the next generation of US citizens.
So, all right, I want to talk animal stories. So when you mentioned the salmon, my neuron fired, and I want to hear about your cool.
Boy, COVID
stories.
has been tough. You only have one neuron left, huh?
It fires every once in a while, usually about once per day.
Yeah.
So, I was as part of my NASA training, we did this wilderness survival course. The goal was to make you in it was in Prince William Sound.
Because I went through the course. I did it in Fairbanks. With
that sounds miserable. In January?
I did it in January. Yep.
Oh my! Oh
I
wow!
did it for an episode. I had a series in the Travel Channel called Into Alaska, and we went through that training. It was like -50. It was horrible.
Was that with the Air Force?
It was with the Air Force.
Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. I also, yeah. That's like the one F-16 base that I never wanted to be stationed at. I mean, I would love to go there in the summertime. I always wanted to go there, but it was the wintertime that it sounded pretty cool, pretty cold. Anyway, no, we were down in Prince William Sound, so in the water, and we were out. We were kayaking. It was a sea kayaking exercise, and we camp for one night, pack up, move to another place, paddle a few kilometers, and camp. And we came to this river, and it was spawning season. It was August, and the salmon were coming back. And by salmon coming back, I mean like there were millions and millions of salmon. It was just unbelievable. And we were kind of nervous about bear. Obviously, bears are a big deal in Alaska, and this is black bear country. And for those who don't know, there's a difference between black bears and brown bears and white bears. You can explain better than I can. But the salmon, we had a fishing rod, so we would fish, and they didn't bite. You just reeled it in, and you would hook them by the fin. That's how many salmon there were.
Yeah.
It was like the most insane thing. And these guys, they would use every bit of energy they had to try and go upstream, and the bears were eating them. It was amazing how many dead salmon there were in this place. It was an impressive view of nature.
Alaska is Alaska because of salmon. Salmon is the energy life force injection that goes into that ecosystem. So there are about 5 species of salmon. And they all undergo this monumental one direction journey in life. And so they begin their lives as freshwater creatures. Then they go through this miraculous metamorphosis where they become a marine creature. They go to the ocean anywhere from 2 years to 7 or 8 years, depending upon the species. Then they return. They actually smell and taste their way and navigate their way. After living in the oceans around the world, they come back to this very stream where they were born to bring life into the world. And significantly less than 1% will successfully come together, mate. And they spend so much energy, they kick off this gene called the senescence gene. And they literally, the irony is this great wave of life as these billions of salmon return to their birth streams, their spawning streams. None of them make it out alive, but yet it's all about life. And in the process of that salmon coming home to die, but to ironically bring the next generation to the world, they then give a gift to this whole ecosystem. So I don't know if you remember, Terry, along that river, you will see the blueberry, blackberries, the salmonberry branches, they bow covered with berries because of all that nitrogen that goes in. The bald eagles, the bears. A bear, those brown bears and those black bears, especially the brown bears, the Kodiak bears, they will literally feast on those salmon to the point where they're consuming 100,000 calories a day. They will put on they'll gain 300, 400, 500 pounds during that window. And that window is not out of gluttony, it's out of necessity, because
it's narrow.
That's how they get their energy to survive that long, vicious winter in their hibernaculum. But it's the salmon story. That whole ecosystem is because of itself, only because of the salmon.
Wow, that is incredible. So the bears, the instructors on this training course really brought us home about bears, but they assured us that we were in black bear country, which isn't too bad because the brown bears is a whole different universe. The rules that you have to follow.
Well, depending on more people in the U.S. are hurt by black bears than they are by brown bears or grizzly bears, but that's because there's so many more black bears.
Right.
And many of them are in New Jersey. But in Alaska, you have the black bear, you have the polar bear in the north, then you have the grizzly bears divided into your grizzly bear and the brown bear. So the Kodiak brown bear is a type of grizzly bear. Interestingly, it's because of that salmon that they've been gigantified, because of all that energy that they get. They've become so huge. So a Montana grizzly bear that weighs, 200, 300 pounds, compare that to the 900-pound Kodiak bear.
Alaska, right?
Amazingly, the Kodiak bear, though, they're so focused on salmon, they very rarely interact with people. I would much rather be with a very fat and happy, satiated Kodiak bear than a very ornery, horny black bear. I've actually had it happen where we're fishing in Alaska, filming in Alaska, where Kodiak bears have come right up next to me, walk under my fishing line, and happened so quickly. They do what's called cub dumping, where I've had sows come in and they'll drop the cubs off, and you literally are supposed to walk away. You don't run. You don't want to have any interaction, but they'll be like, okay, if I leave my cubs to go fish, that male may kill my cubs. So I'll cub dump with this naked white bipedal ape, let him babysit my cubs while I go catch a fish. And that they do that all the time. I mean, they're just incredible, incredible creatures.
Wow. So you did grizzly bear childcare.
I was a Head Start grizzly bear teacher.
So
but unwillingly, I didn't want to do it. I had a ranger with me. He's like, we got to go. Come on. Not safe. We walked off. But
so with a bear, do you fight? Do you play dead? Do you run? Do you, how do you interact? What do you do if you
kind of do all those things in order?
Right.
So the thing is to avoid an element of surprise, to not scare the bear, because that's when things go awry.
Bad things, right?
Yeah. So, when you're in bear country, that's why you want bells on. Literally, they say wear bells. You want to make any sort of noise. So that bear, because what the significant danger is that you're going to alarm a female sow with her cubs, and she will defend her cubs to the death. Right. So what you have to do is just let that bear know you're in her country, and hopefully she'll get out of your way. Now, if it hits the fan, you want to be larger than life. What you don't ever do is run, because you can't outrun a bear.
Right.
At best, you can outrun your cameraman, but
if you're with the cameraman's got all the gear.
Yeah. Hire a very fat cameraman with an enlarged heart. It's your best chance to survive a bear attack. But you want to, and then if that bear comes and you realize it's going down, you fight. And if that ain't working, you play dead. There are people that have played dead, and the bear has just smelt them and walked off. But there's so many times you're around. It's like sharks in a healthy marine ecosystem. You're never more than 100 yards away from a shark, 100 meters away from a shark. And people knew that. They probably wouldn't go in the water. In bear country, my wife, Natasha, my oldest daughter, when she was 3 years old, we were filming in Kodiak. We were actually in a plane accident. Our engine blew and we crash landed in Brooks Falls, where we had just been filming. We went back and made an emergency landing, and we were fine. But we were stuck in the middle of this wilderness for many, many hours waiting for a rescue plane to come get us. And my daughter had to go to the bathroom. I had her on my shoulders. We walked through the woods, through the ferns. She finished her business. We came back, and I noticed I had a headlamp. Over every one of my footprints was a giant bear track. So a bear had literally followed us in to the woods.
Wow.
And nothing happened.
Right. When we were on this camping trip, you're at nighttime, 1 a.m, you got to get up and go to the bathroom. You just go. But when we were at that salmon river, there was giant bear tracks everywhere, bear scat, it was. So, man, I was so nervous. I had the light on and I was just like yelling, "Hey, bear, bear," and trying to make as much noise to scare them away.
Yeah, they're
How about white bears?
Creatures. Kodiak, polar bears. So I've had a chance. I've actually twice have worked with a dear friend of mine who I admire so much. He's one of the top polar bear experts. He was the head USGS scientist for polar bears. So I got invited by the Department of the Interior to go up and collar them, put satellite collars in them. So in Kaktovik by helicopter in April, it's minus 60, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. You're helicopter, you're darting them, and then you're studying, you take little samples of fat to see if they're absorbing heavy metals. It's incredible to look at how climate change is impacting the species. But polar bears are remarkable, remarkable bears. So interestingly, polar bears, black bears, and grizzly bears, they're only about 20,000 years apart from each other. So they can all interbreed. You know, you can actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, people don't. It's like a coyote
Like
and
a labradoodle.
Wolf. Yeah, a labradoodle. A labradoodle that could eat you. But
like a pit bull shepherd.
Yeah, but what they can do though is, first of all, they need that ice to survive. They live in a world of ice. They're actually recognized as a marine mammal. They're actually classified as a marine mammal because they spend so much time in the open water. But I've seen a polar bear sit over a breathing hole of a seal. And so that hole is about 3 inches wide, and that's where the seal will come up. So you have to imagine this 5 or 6 feet of ice that kind of has this volcano pit in it where he comes up and takes a breath. That polar bear will sit in his 50, 60 mile an hour wind that's minus 70 and just sit there staring at that hole for 6, 7, 8 hours, waiting. And that moment, that 1 second, that seal comes up to take a breath, he reaches in, crushes through the ice, and grabs a 200-pound seal that's this wide with one hand and pulls him through a hole that's this thick.
Holy cow.
So that's, I mean, it's incredible. They're incredible. They can smell a seal swimming underneath 6 feet of ice in the seawater.
Wow.
Incredible creatures.
They can smell through water.
Yeah. They can smell through the ice.
Norway, my friend in Norway told me that there's in the far north, is where polar bears are. And she said that there's places where you have to have a gun. Like you're not allowed. There's a law that the humans aren't allowed to go out without a gun. There's also a law that it's illegal to shoot a polar bear. So I'm like, I think I'd rather be alive.
In a lot of Alaska, in the remote parts of Alaska, 90% of Alaska is only accessible by boat or by float plane.
Right.
And those remote areas, yes, you go around armed. I have. My friends do. You have to. It's dangerous country.
Right. You're part of the food chain. You're part of the food chain.
Every year, someone is. A few people become a part of it.
Yeah.
It's the last great wild frontier in North America.
One of the most amazing experiences of my life, we were paddling on this, again, Alaska kayaking trip, and this big, giant black thing came out of the water, orcas, like right next to me. It was so amazing. And I remember thinking this thing could just eat me if it wanted to. It was just unbelievable.
Orca whales are incredible whales. I don't think there's any example of a wild orca ever killing someone in the water kayaking. I think the only time there's been deadly human whale conflict has been in captivity.
Right.
That whale has had issues and someone was too close.
Just snapped. Yeah. Speaking of whales, we were going down this, I don't know if it's a fjord, these kind of narrow passages, and there was this big thing on the beach. So we're like, hey, what's that? We went over to look at it, and we got closer and closer, and all of a sudden the smell started getting really bad. And it was big. It was like much bigger than a bus. And it got bad. And as we got close to it, we realized it was a beached whale, and it was huge. It wasn't an orca.
It's probably a gray whale. Probably a gray whale.
A gray whale?
How long ago was that?
Oh, this was 10 years ago or something. It was a while ago. Maybe longer.
Like just 3 years ago along the Pacific, because I filmed it along the Pacific Northwest into Alaska, into places like Sitka, Alaska, south south part of Alaska. They had a huge gray whale die off, and it was largely because they couldn't get the food. And we actually found a dead gray whale that had washed its way up like 50 miles into the interior in a freshwater river system. It was so crazy. We came across, I was like with a friend of mine, and she's actually a Natgeo producer, and we were going over a bridge. I went, stop. I said, there's a whale. And we got out, and it was like freshwater system, and it's like a whale. It was crazy.
It just washed up there.
It just goes think of those huge tides that will push stuff up.
Yeah. That's amazing. This thing, you couldn't tell. I mean, you could sort of tell it was a whale, but it was like half decomposed or more.
Yeah.
It was covered in maggots. I mean, there must have been the whole thing was like pulsing and moving. It was so disgusting. And I was wondering, I mean, like, does that take years to decompose or months?
No. There's so many things that are feeding on that.
Right.
So everything from
maggots.
Well, your invertebrates, especially if it's crabs and other creatures, but bears will come down and eat it. Wolves will come down to eat it. All the predators, ravens and crows will come down to eat it. Bald eagles will come down and eat it. It within a season, that entire whale will be dispatched.
Wow. It was the nature in Alaska was just amazing. The eagles, I remember seeing a bald eagle. I'm like, wow, there's a bald eagle, which we see sometimes, I think, on the Chesapeake Bay.
They've recovered beautifully in the Chesapeake. Yep.
Yeah. My parents live there, and they see my stepdad sends me pictures of bald eagles, but in Alaska, like the first time it was kind of cool.
They're like pigeons.
They're like mosquitoes. I mean, they were everywhere. And the call that they make, it's like this. It's not a very manly call at all. It's like
cackle.
Yeah.
High pitched, shrilly cackle. Yes.
It's not what you think. Yeah. How about, so speaking of that, I had a chance to go down to Patagonia a couple years ago. We were filming a pilot for potentially a TV show, and the condors there.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of those? Or
I filmed with them. I just filmed with an Andean condor last year. They're incredible.
They're huge.
They're huge. They're the largest. I think they're the largest flighted bird in all of the Americas. Incredible creatures. Again, a real positive story. Like the American condor, the California condor, which is equally majestic and magnificent. The California condor actually became extinct in the wild. Wow. And we went out and collected every last surviving one, which was just a couple of dozen. Today, there's maybe between 500 and 700 living in the wild. Wow. And it's been an equally Herculean project to try to protect the Andean condor because they've lost a lot of their habitat. And these are creatures, they don't hunt, they only consume dead things. Mm-hmm. So for the Andean condor, they rely on, ironically, puma and jaguar, because puma and jaguar kill the wanakas and the alpacas, the kind of camel-like animals. Mm-hmm. And then those birds, the Andean condors, will feed on the carrion, will feed as scavengers. So when we dropped down those predator populations, not enough of those animals were getting killed in the wild, so they couldn't eat. Plus, they were being vilified, and people were poison baiting them. Same thing happened with the California condors, but we're now starting to see a recovery. We noticed, interestingly, very important, the survival of California condors are dead whales and seals and sea lions and marine mammals that wash up in the beaches.
It's amazing how if you tweak just one parameter in this really complicated multivariable problem that is the ecosystem, you tweak just one parameter and it has so many impacts, right? Unintended consequences.
You pull up one building block and the pyramid collapses.
Yeah, that's amazing. When we were in Patagonia for this trip, one one of the stories, and I had no idea until we got there, and like the fixer found this story for us, are beavers. And so apparently there was this Canadian pelt farmer back 40, 50 years ago. They brought down these Canadian, beavers, and they were going to breed them, I guess, for their pelts, whatever. But in Canada, they have really big, thick oak trees, and they have some serious teeth. They can go after a tree and, take the tree down. Well, in this part of Patagonia, they have really soft pine trees or whatever. The wood was different. So these beavers would just completely decimate a forest. And we went out to film it. And there was like this, it was like a tree, killing field. There were just, the whole forest was felled by, it was amazing. Like one beaver couple, like a beaver mom and dad, would just wipe out huge amounts of trees.
Well, they do that on their own here. I mean, it's incredible. So you're right. Here we have trees like aspen, and we have poplar, and we have pine trees and birch trees, and probably one of the most important to beavers are willow trees, which they use to be landscape architects, to create lakes and rivers, right, and to build their lodges and their dams. Right. It's incredible what they can do. They can take a forest and turn it into a meadow very, very quickly. They're remarkable. But what we did, it's just how silly human beings and how detrimental we can be to the environment. So yes, we took the beavers from Canada and destroyed the Chilean archipelago. And then to make it even worse, we took rodents from, we took nutria from Argentina and brought them to the Chesapeake and to areas like Louisiana, and we just now got rid of the last nutria. No, we didn't. There's one in my lake. Oh, really? It's nasty. It's this giant black rodent. I think it's a nutria. Sure? Everybody says it's not. It's a muskrat. I bet it's a muskrat. I'm going to send you a picture because everybody calls it a nutria. I'm going to send you a picture. It could be. But anyway, so you could see how by introducing these non-native species, how we flip those ecosystems upside down into chaos. And and another powerful example is, so Yellowstone, even though it was a protected national park, one of our first celebrated national parks in the United States, we got rid of the wolves. So for 100 years, there were no wolves in Yellowstone up until the 90s. Right. And when we reintroduced the wolves. So for the entire Yellowstone National Park, there was only one pair of beaver for the entire park. When the wolves came back, the elk population went back to what is called carrying capacity, where it was stable. The willow trees came back. When the willows came back, the beaver came back. When the beaver came back, the streams and waterways were restored, which increased the cutthroat population and amphibian population. So frogs and fish benefited from wolves because it meant more beavers. Right. It's amazing, man. The ecosystem is such a cool, it's like a cool design. How so many things interact. I should film this for a living. I should do that. Start filming nature and animals. You should. You're pretty good on camera. I should do that. Yeah. If you need a letter of recommendation, let me know. That'd be great. Listen up, guys. I have found the ultimate t-shirt. Have you ever worn a wool t-shirt? If not, thank me later. They are truly nature's miracle. Our friends at Unbound Merino sent me these spectacular clothes, and let me tell you, these shirts are out of this world. They're made of 100% ultra-fine premium merino wool. It's not the itchy kind. And they are functional, minimalist in style, a wardrobe staple, and most importantly, they're sustainable. Naturally odor-resistant, antibacterial, and fast-drying, you can work out in these clothes, you can go out in them, and in my case, you can even go to space in them, which I actually did. There's no need for a washing machine, which is good because there isn't one in space. When you wear Unbound Merino for several consecutive days, you will still smell fresh and look stylish the whole time. Visit www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code DOWN to EARTH for a special 15% discount at checkout.
That's www.unboundmerino.com and enter the code Down to Earth for a special 15% discount. Finally, a big thanks to Unbound Merino for sponsoring this episode.
So the Chesapeake Bay, that's kind of my home. I grew up there. When I was a kid, we couldn't fish for rockfish. The oyster population was bad, anyway. And those things seem to really have come back. And I think there was a couple things that we made some tough decisions back in the 70s and 80s with farmers trying to minimize the chemicals they use and also industrial pollution. And the Bay, I think, is but you just filmed a movie about the Bay.
I did a credit with the
Jim
Whitaker
Nyhouse.
Center.
Yeah.
At the Whitaker Center out of Pennsylvania, we filmed this amazing IMAX style, large format film called Expedition Chesapeake. And we filmed it over a couple of years. So you're right. It was in the 1970s where we took away the use of DDT. And by not using DDT, which was used in agriculture, it allowed the recovery of osprey and bald eagles. So the entire population of bald eagles by the 1970s had been reduced to less than 100 pair. Only one for the entire state of New York. None that I was aware of in the Chesapeake because of DDT. Same thing for osprey, because the DDT would cause the shells to become brittle. So they would literally crack under the weight of a feather from the nesting parents. So by getting rid of that, managing some of our pollutants has made somewhat of a difference. We are seeing some positive changes, but we're noticing still a huge decline in the oyster population and the blue crab population, which are really the life link building blocks for that ecosystem. A lot of it has to do with water usage, but also much of the Chesapeake now has hard surface barriers. They have retaining walls and stuff like that. And that has caused the water to move unnaturally in the way it normally should, which means there's no proper ebb and flow to the water moving hydrology cycle of the Chesapeake. All of that. And you have, 40 something million people live around the Chesapeake in those surrounding states. And people don't realize the Chesapeake begins in New York. It begins right in the backyard of the National Baseball Museum is the start of the Susquehanna River, which is about this wide. And it eventually becomes one of the most historic, most important river systems and one of the most important estuaries in the world, which is the Chesapeake.
It's amazing. So how is the crab, the crab's obviously important for Maryland because Baltimore crab cakes are the best in the world. But why they're just these, I don't know, they kind of bottom scavenger kind of creatures, but how is that important to the rest of the ecosystem?
Well, I never want to poo-poo a Chesapeake crab, but I am from New England, and there's a reason why we have lobsters. Because
lobsters are not crabs.
I know, but crabs are a lot of work, and lobsters aren't, if you know what you're doing.
That's true.
And you get a lot more meat. I sat down at a dinner. I'm like, all right, what's wrong with this picture? A mallet and trash bags and a lot of bloody fingertips
and newspapers.
No, thank you. And
newspapers. But you burn more calories than you eat, so it keeps you in shape. Yes, it's like you get your workout and
they should call it keto crab. And actually, the truth is, if there's a very good chance that the crab you're getting that in a lot of places isn't Maryland crab.
Well,
it's from the Philippines or someplace like that.
Right.
But the truth is, crabs are in trouble, and it's not all about overfishing. They require seagrass beds, and seagrass beds require healthy marine water systems. And unfortunately, that's been compromised. So without the seagrass bed, you get huge levels of erosion you know, hundreds and hundreds of or thousands of square footage of shoreline from the Chesapeake disappears every year because of erosion. And we're losing that important underwater substrate, which these crabs depend upon.
I did not know that. You know, so talking about fishing and all the different ecological problems we have, overfishing seems to be really bad, right? That's not a good thing for the world, like for future human generations.
Yeah, well, I love to fish and I love to eat fish. So, I experience this conflict where I am an outdoorsman. I love to connect with nature and fish.
Right.
And where I live, we have our challenges, but we have the Mass Department of Fish and Wildlife, they do a really good job. NOAA does a good job along our coast. We have a healthy bluefin tuna population here. Our lobster population, our striped bass fish population has rebounded, although we do face some challenges. But globally, people consume huge amounts of fish, and every part of that fish, they ferment their fish. Like you go to Southeast Asia, every meal has fish in it. And between climate change, between the acidification and warming of our oceans, the pollution of our oceans, the dumping 10 billion pounds of plastic in our oceans every year,
right,
and then overfishing, that has become a perfect extinction storm for marine species. Our oceans are in serious trouble. And not even just the fish, again, the building blocks of life. So, for example, a coral reef, which is the nursery of our oceans, the marsh system of the estuaries in the Chesapeake, it's the nursery, it's the head start for game and commercial fisheries, from crab to red drum to rockfish and striped bass. Around the world, we're seeing just a tremendous damage to these ecosystems. So I have, fortunately, over my career in life, I've scuba dived most of the great reef systems, from Palau to Indonesia to Micronesia to Australia. I've been just about anywhere. I've had a whole series based 5 years. I had a series that was all about the oceans. So the last few years, I've had a chance to revisit probably 90% of these places. And it broke my heart to see how much they have changed. Recently, I was in Hawaii, and I've been to Hawaii probably 50 or 60 times over the years, filming all sorts of shows there. And I've done a lot of stuff on whales, reefs, and a reef system I visited just 6 or 7 years ago. I went back with one of those scientists I worked with before. I could not recognize it. It had been virtually destroyed. And one of the biggest challenges, you have issues with fishing, pollution, plastics, but sunblock. People wearing suntan or sunblock lotions gets off their skin, gets on that one living layer of life over a coral reef structure and kills it. So we even kill things by loving it to death. But our oceans are in serious trouble, and overfishing is just one cog in that wheel of destruction that's spinning through this watery living world.
The wheel of destruction. I was thinking is my overfishing, but also the technique, like when you just drag nets through, and you bring up turtles and things you shouldn't be bringing up.
It's all of this is a challenge, and as our species continues to grow, so does our technology to just scrape and scour everything.
Right.
And that's kind of where we are at in the world. You can dredge and go there in an effort to get sea scallops. You take up the entire seabed with you.
Right.
That takes years and years to come back.
Right.
But it's our reality.
Yeah, but so we need to figure out the technology to do those things without destroying, like sustainably, right? You can manage a forest, chop down some trees, let them grow. As long as you manage it properly, it's there forever. It's renewable. You need to figure out how to fish sustainably, right?
You do, and I don't know what the solution is. a lot of people thought fish farming would be the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out, while there may be some benefits to, at an industrial scale, producing salmon and other types of fish, maybe because you're not taking them from the wild, they have produced their own nightmarish stories of pollution, species that go awry, and jobs that get impacted.
Right.
Alaska can be a good model for sustainability, in that there are areas of Alaska where they figured out that balance, how much to take, how much to leave. Here's your finite window. If you break the laws, you're held accountable with very strong regulation and enforcement. I think we can look to places like Alaska where they get that, oh, this isn't about fishing for today. This is about fishing for today, tomorrow. My son, my daughter, she or he's going to become a fisherman. How do we make sure there's fish there for them, for the next generation? But then, of course, you have the international challenge where people come from other parts of the world. In some places, they can come within 3 miles of your coastline and partake of that natural resource.
Fish however they want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's so you've had a lot of international travel. So I just want to find out, what's your favorite place? What's your favorite animal? I want to talk about some cool stories. I read a story about an elephant in Phnom Penh.
Yeah. So that's not what I would say is my favorite story.
It didn't sound very fun.
Was the story I almost lost my arm. No, but I had created and I was co-presenting a series for CNN with Anderson Cooper. Cooper, as you say. In Massachusetts, we say Cooper. And Sanjay Gupta. And it was called Planet in Peril. And we were doing this whole story on these elephants. And this is a facility I'd worked at for many, many years over the years. And this elephant had a tantrum. And when you're 10,000 pounds, you can get hurt. You get hurt from that 10,000 pound temper tantrum. And I grabbed my arm and nearly crushed my arm. So it was not fun.
So you've been Southeast Asia, Africa, South America. You've been everywhere.
I've been to, the only place I haven't been to, which a lot of people are always surprised, is I've not been to Antarctica. And I don't know why. I mean, we've looked at stories. I think it's definitely kind of far away enough that it requires more time than you have. So you need to go down there for a long window of time. And you often need sort of some partnering, sponsor funding to make it happen. Right. But every time, or I got invited to go and it was like, oh, we're going to pay for you to go to Antarctica. Great. When are we going? Oh, you're going to leave the day before Thanksgiving and you come back the day after Christmas. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to go. I want to be,
I had a chance to go there a couple years ago.
I want Thanksgiving with a turkey, not a penguin.
It is amazing, Jeff. I had a chance to go there 2 or 3 years ago. It was just unbelievable.
Oh, I definitely want to go. And I've been close. Like I was in Tierra del Fuego last year. We're filming down there in Chile, and you're pretty close. And I've been to Tasmania, and I've been to New Zealand and many times. And but yeah, I'll get there someday.
So when I went there, I went through South Africa. We stopped in Cape Town on our way.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to see penguins, and we did. The weather was bad, and in Antarctica, when the weather's bad, you respect it because the weather wins, Anyway, so I didn't see any penguins on the ice. And then when I got back to South Africa, there's a colony of penguins there. There's actually like African penguins. It was like in the 80s. It was a sunny day. There was penguins. It was crazy.
Yeah, there's jackass penguins, and that's their name, and rockhoppers. They're beautiful penguins. Yeah,
I think these were rockhoppers.
And they're in a lot of trouble. I've filmed those penguins again because of climate change. They're in a lot of trouble because the fish that they need to eat. So they are big sardine eaters, and other types of fish, and those fish need to be cold. And so fish have to stay cold, so they go down a little deeper and they just get out of range for those penguins, or there's mass die-offs of the fish that they depend upon. But they're in serious trouble now, unfortunately.
Yeah, they were really cool, but I just didn't expect to see penguins in Africa and not in Antarctica. That was kind of a crazy trip.
You can see penguins in New Zealand.
Really?
There's penguins in New Zealand. There's penguins in Australia. You have blue fairy penguins in Australia. You have penguins in Ecuador, in Argentina.
Ecuador.
Yeah, you have Magellan penguins. Yeah, there's penguins.
I did not know that. So that's in it. So I had a question, or not a question, but I guess maybe an observation. There's penguins in the south, but there's not in the north. And I think I know the reason, but why is there, what do you think the reason for that?
What do you think the reason is?
Polar bears.
No, that wouldn't be the reason.
That's not the reason.
No, because they face penguins have huge predators and challenges from pinnipeds and seals and stuff like
lions,
that.
Yeah.
And there are birds that are penguin-like, like guillemots and murres that live in the Arctic, that nest on areas that are accessible to bears and other predators, and their populations aren't impacted by that. It's just where penguins evolved, and they basically evolved to be around Antarctica, and they need to be in areas that are cool to cold. So it would be such a Herculean journey to make your way up north. They just were never established there.
That's where they're there. Yeah. I just always assumed if somebody brought a polar bear to Antarctica, that would be the end of the, after a century, there'd be no more penguins down there.
No, I think polar bears would probably
survive.
Okay. They would eat well. Yeah.
Right. So of all these animals, all these different places that you've been, what is your favorite?
Well, I like so many places, and doing these shows over the years, I've really come to appreciate North America because, I remember I did my graduate work in rainforests in Central America, and I love Africa. And I remember before this whole career started, I fantasized about living in the Amazon, which I eventually would do, doing conservation work on rainforests. But you can go to a place where, you'll see the anaconda or a tapir or jaguar. But then when you're done, you can't leave your hotel at night because you'll get robbed, or you have to go through all this political chaos or corruption. With all our challenges in North America, we still have remarkable wilderness. Mm-hmm. We have incredible wild places. I mean, you look at where you live. You're not far from Big Bend National Park. We have a retreat in Arizona, and it's right about against the national park. I'm looking out right now as I talk to you, and I've seen 4 seals go by, and I'm watching Arctic eiders and feed off our rich mussel beds. And then I can have my life where my children are safe. And so there's very few places in the world where in 2.5 hours, I can go from 20 degrees Fahrenheit and ice fishing to fishing for tarpon in a mangrove forest off the Florida coast, or dive a reef system off of the tip of Florida, or go to a desert in the West, or go to Arctic conditions. We have every type of wild living community, prairies and grasslands. The African savanna, I can find our version of that in South Dakota, and the tall grass prairie. We are so lucky. And again, while we face so many challenges, we kind of figured out early on with pioneers like Teddy Roosevelt, John Muir, Aldo Leopold, we figured out that our prosperity as a nation depended on healthy wild environments and wild species. And we figured that out after we drove many things to extinction. And in our country, so if you go to Madagascar, I don't know if you've ever been there, but Madagascar is spectacular. But 99% of Madagascar is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Every person in the United States owns a third of an acre of national park. That doesn't even include national refuges, state parks, other wildlands. That doesn't include private wildlife sanctuaries. We have locked up billions of acres in our country that are forever protected. And I think that is quite remarkable. And you can go today, I can get in my kayak today if I so much wanted to freeze to death and paddle my way and be amongst a wild nature, yet I'm only 26 miles from a major metropolis.
Right.
I mean, that to me is what gives me hope. But with that said, I love Australia. I love New Zealand. I mean, I think of memories. My wife and I were talking about when we were been married. She was pregnant with Maya, so this would have been 17 years ago, and she's helping me put radio collars on hyenas in Tanzania. And I'm humbled by those experiences because I think they've allowed me to have the career that I've had, and that was my dream, was to be able to have those experiences and to be able to share them with an expansive audience. And largely I've been able to do that. And, but this country, this educational system is what allowed me to do that.
Yeah, that's true. And, for all the problems that America has, and there's a lot, we deal with them. Like, we admit them. We go, hey, we made this mistake. Let's try and make it better. That's one of the many things I love about my country, is that we're not just going to, ignore things if something's wrong. Sometimes it takes a long time, but we deal with problems and we fix them. And there's a long waiting list to get here. There's a long waiting list to get here.
And it's only now recently where I'm kind of going, what's happening here? Why are people listening to each other? Why are people, where did the conspiracy theory lifeboat become an option?
Right.
That is new to me. But for example, with conservation, historically, for the whole breadth of our nation, it was never a political
left or right
choice, left or right.
Right.
The reason why we have bald eagles today is because of Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon signed the Endangered Species Act into law and the Clean Air and Water Act. We wouldn't have national parks if it wasn't for Teddy Roosevelt.
Right.
We wouldn't have wolves in Yellowstone if it wasn't for President Bill Clinton. So we have done incredible things without politics being an obstacle.
Right.
And that's to me what's amazing about our country.
Michael Jordan said Republicans and Democrats both buy sneakers. And I think Republicans, Democrats, and Independents all like the outdoors. I mean, who doesn't like, the Rocky Mountain National Park or the Florida Keys, like you said? I think that's, maybe that's something that can bring us together. I always talk about how space exploration, while all these things divide us on Earth, space exploration can kind of bring people together. And I think conservation hopefully can be one of those things. When I was in space, I had a chance to make this movie called A Beautiful Planet. I helped make it, and Tony Myers was our director. And it was about life in space, but also just about our beautiful planet and the things we need to do for conservation. And it really is, Jeff. I mean, the planet is beautiful. We hear doom and gloom all the time, but Earth is really beautiful. The two problems that I could see from space, which is just anecdote, that's not really data, that's just my eyeballs looking back. The two things that I saw were pollution, especially over China. It was this kind of brown, smoggy place. And also India. India was pretty smoggy too. And deforestation. And the Amazon was heartbreaking. Most of the Amazon looks good, but man, there's big square chunks of the
Huge.
Amazon that have been cut down. And Madagascar, you mentioned Madagascar. I think the eastern part, there's a little green strip in the east, and I've never been there. I've heard it's like rainforest, but 90% of that island is just brown. The Betsaboka River Delta it looks like it's bleeding. An astronaut back in the 80s said it looks like Madagascar is bleeding, excuse me, from the topsoil coming off. So most of the earth is really spectacular, but yeah, Madagascar was really the eastern part though. Is it like the Amazon there, the rainforest?
They have all sorts of habitat. They've got desert, they've got grasslands, and they've got incredible coastlines,
Right.
and they've got a beautiful rainforest. They have ancient trees. So, 99% of Madagascar is pretty much gone or has been compromised. And 99% of what lives in Madagascar is only found in Madagascar.
Right.
So, because they have the highest
Right.
level of endemic or unique species found nowhere else. All of that, makes it will be such a terrible extinction tragedy if it continues
Right.
to unfold.
Right.
With that said, Madagascar is a place where you could have tremendous hope. There are enough little bits of fragment forest around that they could almost become like a skin graft. If you could adequately protect those areas, you could save that. And also, a lot of the species there are small. So unlike Africa, where like, oh my gosh, an elephant requires 100 square miles.
Right.
A pride of lions requires 60 square miles.
Right.
A veiled chameleon requires, 15 acres of most of these animals are very, very small.
Right.
So a lot of what people think is the potential reservoir of hope for saving a lot of wild places and a wild species are what we call corridors. Creating multi-use strips of habitat that connect intact ecosystems. So you could have, let's say, Monte de Ombre National Park, which is only about 400 acres in size. But again, remember, the biggest thing in there is a fossa, and it's about this big. Everything else is about this big.
It's in Madagascar?
In Madagascar.
Right.
So if you can create protected ribbons of habitat, a bridge of life from one ecosystem to another, that would make a big difference. The other is the key to saving endangered species and to saving imperiled ecosystems. The absolute key is to meet the needs of human beings. The greatest danger to a species is disenfranchised people with no hope. Because those are the people that are at that point in their lives where they need to do what they need to do to survive and feed their families. So by providing alternative livelihood resource possibilities, providing ways to ensure the prosperity of the family, health and survival of your children, a decent education, that is how you save an ecosystem. You could create all the national parks you want in Ecuador, but the ranger will go in there and poach the wildlife if he doesn't get a good paycheck and he can't feed his family.
His kids are starving. Yeah.
Yes. So places where, for example, I did a story in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, where they were actually using their best top committed rangers were former poachers or soldiers in the Khmer Rouge, because they knew the rainforest. And now, instead of having a livelihood that was based on putting their own lives in jeopardy, they had a sustainable long-term livelihood where they could be proud of and their families could be taken care of. If you're a person in Africa and your children are starving and you have the chance of making $5,000 to kill a rhino for that horn that will sell in Yemen for $50,000, that's a risk worth taking because you don't have an alternative. One of the best men I've ever met who was doing incredible work to take care of an orphan rhino himself was at one time a rhino poacher, and he was given an opportunity to salvage his life and choose a different direction through a foundation. That's how you save nature, is by saving people. Believe it or not, I've come to learn that.
No, I'm so glad you said that. I read an article a few years ago that said they gave a number, and they said once you pass about $10,000 a year GDP average income, so once people make that amount, then they switch from just surviving to they want to preserve the environment around them, and it's so important. That is such a great point that most people don't think. Most people think that economic development is bad for the environment, and it can be, but when people's lives get better, like you said, they want to protect their environment. I don't think people naturally want to just destroy things, but the need to survive is greater than the need to conserve. So
no one is hardwired to want to have a life expectancy that's 40% less than the first world, to likely have one or two children die from a medical condition or starvation, to cook over a fire pit and breathe an acrid black kerosene smoke all day, and then sneak into a national park to kill your dinner. No one wants to do that.
Right.
Now, we do have incredible issues with anti-conservation based cultural influences. So, for example, in numerous regions in Asia where there is prestige bushmeat, prestige wildlife trade, believing that there's medicinal value or cultural value, that is a big problem. The black market wildlife trade is a $20 billion a year industry.
Yeah, that kind of stuff needs to be fixed. So as you travel to Africa and Cambodia and stuff, have you ever gotten sick? There's malaria, there's yellow fever, there's all that stuff.
I have. I've had dengue fever. I've had malaria. I've had African tick fever. So I've had a few things.
Man, that should protect you from COVID. I think you probably have enough antibodies.
You would think. Yeah. No, I've had infections. I've had wounds. I mean, yeah, I've gotten real sick. Got so sick in India once. I lost like 40 pounds. I got to 158 pounds. I have like a picture of how skinny I was, and I'm like, oh, I wish I was that skinny again. And it was great. I was like, I'm a 29-inch waist. I look like Matt. I will show you this picture. I look like Matt Damon from that movie with Meg Ryan. Remember, she's a helicopter pilot.
Like in the 90s.
Yeah, and it's a true story. She was a veteran, and unfortunately she was killed in combat. She didn't get recognized. Oh, man. Matt Damon is this, like, I think, drug addict, former soldier. And so when I was really sick in India, and they're like, hey, you look like Matt Damon. I'm like, thanks. Well, when he was dying, I'm like, oh, thanks.
When he was a drug addict.
Yeah.
So what's on your bucket list after doing all these things? Besides working with me.
Working with you, Terry, that's big on my bucket list. I have a lot of projects. There's two projects. One of them that looks like it's very close to coming to fruition, which is kind of like time for today, especially after COVID, this idea where we're going to look at where we are in our country and show in a positive way what we can do from one backyard to the next to save our national natural wild heritage. That's a big project for me, and that I'm very excited about. And I think I believe that'll be in production this summer. And then I have an idea for a really spectacle, and I think I showed you that sizzle reel, where it's this ultimate kind of the Bible of where we are on our planet, climate change, habitat loss, pollution, human population, species exploitation, and how we are the last generation. We have this one chance. As you say, you see anecdotally from space, you look upon our beautiful little blue marble, and there's still hope. Mm-hmm. But as you see, you can literally see island nations bleeding their natural resources into the sea. We are the last generation that can consequentially secure our wild legacy for the next generation. That has come close. It's a very expensive series to make. It is, it also trying to get a network to realize this is the time for that series, where a lot of people are, are caught up in reality-based television shows,
The Kardashians.
whatever. MTV Real World is coming back versus MTV focusing on what this MTV generation will face on their planet. So I'm very excited about that series. I've had good, productive conversations, but that is going to be a Herculean leap to try to get that to fruition. That would be kind of the career, my zenith career moment.
Mm-hmm.
But very excited about this national series about looking at how we're saving our planet for our kids and their kids. And basically, actually, it's the opposite of that. The America we have today, we don't inherit from our ancestors. We're borrowing it from our children and people who are wisely making that loan and paying it back with interest.
I love that thought. There's so many things that we're doing that borrows from our children, good and bad. The national debt that we're incurring, our kids are going to have to pay back. The environmental problems we leave are for our kids, or the environmental, hopefully improvements that we leave will also be enjoyed by our kids. Like Teddy Roosevelt, what he did, you and I enjoy today. So there's a lot of things that we do that impact future generations, and we just have to have that, looking forward attitude for them, I think.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you and I have some ideas too. We'll see.
Yeah.
Without getting into too many details, hopefully some of those come to fruition.
Yeah, we'll see. I feel hopeful for a couple of them.
Yeah, I think so. Well, hey man, thanks for spending so much time here. We could talk you could do like a 20-year career making TV shows about all these topics.
I should. Maybe I'll start doing infomercials.
Maybe I'm
going to start a company called Jeff's Pillow.
Oh my God. But wait, there's more. Act now and you'll get well, thanks for coming on, Jeff. And hopefully we'll be doing more stuff in the future. And wish I was up there with all those people that you have partying at your house.
Well, there ain't no one partying here. It's me and the cat and the dog.
All right. We'll say hi to Natasha and the girls, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Terry.
Okay. We'll see you.